think we've touched on it.
I think we should tell the whole story, because I think back then we were a little shy about it because we weren't sure if Sleepy Gary knew about the story.
And now we know
He knows that he does not.
He embraces it, exactly. So
as he says, well, I sleep naked. Like, by the way, punchline.
Good.
Thank you, Canadian Beam Bourbon Ambassador.
Yeah.
We'll distill it down.
Yes, let's do that. Let's do that.
No chemistry though.
All right. Nice. Welcome to Whiskey Topic. I'm Mark Bylock.
And I'm Jamie Johnson. I'm back.
You're back, Jamie. You haven't been around for like weeks and weeks. Well, we haven't recorded for the whole month of April because I basically moved.
Right.
And that was painful. And then you were traveling.
Yeah.
Are you a certified distiller now?
Yeah. I totally. No, I don't even know if I'm going to pass the test.
But you did write the test
I
this
wrote
morning.
the test this morning.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so the GCD exam, the General Certification in Distillation. So I got to go to the Balvenie to do the course there, like to go through like the process with all the process people at the distillery. And then took the textbook home and studied a lot.
You took this way more seriously than I would have, I feel.
But I know.
I would have studied like the day before and assumed I would have passed. And you were like studying.
I really had to, because so these are
I'm
my
putting
two.
a lot of pressure on you, by the way, if you don't pass.
I know, because now I'm going to have to like publicly say that I didn't pass. I'm not qualified. What's going on? But it's like my two worst subjects. Like it's like a lot of chemistry and like some math. And so it basically was like literally distilled into like one course. So I hate like,
chemistry.
It was, oh my God.
This would be the best kind of chemistry.
Right?
Well, that's right.
I was like, at one point I was like, oh, if they could make whiskey unfun, this would be it right here. Like they did it. So yeah. So that was this morning. It was great. I got to go to Centennial College to write it, and somebody asked me if I was a teacher. So that's how old I am.
Wow, you're a teacher age now.
Like,
well, congratulations.
Thank
Not
you,
all of us
Professor Johnson. Yep.
Well,
yes.
I don't think anybody would have asked Matt Jones if he was a teacher. So that's what I'm this way. Like, what are you doing here? What's going on? On the podcast today, we have Matt Jones.
Hey, hey.
Hey, I'll say that name properly later in the podcast, the way I normally call it out down the hallway. Wait till later.
Quotations.
Some quotations.
And Bryan Daniel. Well, both returning guests.
Both returning guests.
Yeah.
So great.
It hasn't been that long.
No, it really hasn't been that long.
So great.
It's been a long time for Matt. We just haven't been connecting very
Yeah,
well.
we've been trying.
We've been trying.
We made it like 6 episodes, I think.
Yeah.
It's good to be back.
A lot of changes since then.
A lot of changes since then.
This is gonna be more of an interview situation because I feel if you're in on the whiskey ambassador gossip in Toronto,
Which you all should be, obviously.
I mean, the few thousand Ontario listeners will be very tuned in right now.
You're all very important.
But Ray Daniel used to run the whiskey bar for Delta here at Char number 5, and somebody offered him a friggin' job to work as a brand ambassador for Matt Jones's old portfolio. So this is like former loves. This is like exes. This is a big deal. Matt Jones still works for the same company, so let's not get too dramatic. Yes. However, so Matt Jones, congratulations. So you're now the global whiskey portfolio ambassador for Canada for Beam Suntory.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah,
we'll distill it down.
Yes, let's do that.
No chemistry though.
The World Whiskey Ambassador to Canada. So Beam Suntory is World Whiskey Ambassador to Canada. So basically representing everything not made in Canada or the U.S.
The exact opposite, the inverse of your other. Jamie, inverse? Have you done inverse?
Oh my God, don't go away.
It's going to be math problems all day.
I'm not going to be thinking, but no.
This will be on the test.
Yeah, I just can't wait to crack those bottles over there. I'm pretty excited about it, I'm not going to lie.
And so congratulations, that's a big deal.
Yes,
I know.
This is great.
So we have two. This is the interesting part. We have two former bourbon people, Jamie and Matt.
Now, do we consider ourselves former people?
That's a good question.
I'm always a bourbon people.
We're on Team Whiskey.
Exactly.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, your hashtag or your Twitter and Instagram still bourbon.
Still bourbon thing. Yeah.
So former representatives of bourbon. And Ray, welcome to bourbon.
Again, it's great to be here.
So we thought we'd do a little bit of a skills transfer here. I think this is what the whole plan was. We do a little skills transfer. You'd mentor your replacement in the portfolio. Does that make sense? Is that what we want to do?
Yeah, I kind of want to do a little bit of a passing of the stage.
Oh, that's so
I think I gotta say, I mean, Ray in his own right, he knows a lot about whiskey. He's Irish after all.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's in his blood.
people invented the category. More accurately, as we say, God invented whiskey to prevent the Irish from taking over the world. But
and it didn't work.
But Ray's a powerhouse of whiskey knowledge. He's run a whiskey bar. He's worked at many whiskey bars in Canada and toured around the world. Quite the globetrotter as well. But to be able to really pass the torch, as it were, or the flaming stave. I should light this on fire. That's what we should do. I don't think that's going to work in this way. But very proud to have Ray with the Beam Suntory family, and he's been to Kentucky. He knows that come as a friend, leave his family mentality that Kentuckians exude, and I think Canadians are really going to gravitate towards his style, his presentation, and I mean. It's kind of easy when you got great whiskey, but there's so many other things that go along with it. So we are very proud to have Ray on board. Thanks, and to have a steward of the brand after 8 years of myself, and it was a big decision, but it was time to continue that journey in whiskey, and I couldn't be happier that we have someone like Ray to fill that. So without further ado, do I knight you?
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you, Canadian Beam Bourbon Ambassador.
Thank you very much, sir.
That's the cheesiest thing.
That was the cheesiest thing I've seen you do today.
Right?
Yeah.
We've been
Not ever
already.
But
and my favorite piece of POS that always gets stolen from trade shows. Bartenders love this very flexible service mat that you can only get at the distillery. And I have been ripping this out of consumers' hands that have been trying to steal it on me for years.
Now it's my turn?
Now it's your turn.
Thank you very much.
So for those in the podcast, there was literally a barrel stave and a plastic, well-used Jim Beam mat.
It is seasoned. It is definitely seasoned.
Yeah. I do remember also helping you trying to
some books.
keep that out of people's
This
hands.
is actually more than I got at Christmas. This is great.
This is like a new Christmas.
Oh, this is immersion right here.
Yeah.
Now, I know you know most of these authors. In fact, I'm pretty sure you've read a few chapters of these books already, but some of my favorite authors, many of them have been guests on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Of course, we got Fred Minnick, Bourbon Curious, just a really great way to convey a lot of things to consumers in a very manageable way. He's got some amazing taglines in there that I've been using over the years. The history, the rise and fall of that American classic. And I do need these back because Fred has signed all of them to me. So... By the way,
And you can find these on eBay.
This is all just symbolic.
that's F. Paul the Cult with the American Still Life. I know you're reading Fred's book, but this is essential. Getting through navigating those 230 plus years. Our good friend, we partied with him in Kentucky, Bernie Lubbers. Formerly with Beam, now with Heaven Hill, but he wrote an amazing book as well. Michael Veach, I mean, when I first met Mike back in 2012, I took him up for lunch. I put what was my iPod at the time, this little thing in the middle of the table, turned it on, and we talked for 2 hours. And then, like a year later, he came out with this book, and I'm like, I could have waited.
That's great.
But that one, and of course, Adam Rogers' Proof. So you definitely have to put these in the rotation for sure. So.
Aww, that was lovely.
That was so sweet, man.
Yay! We should have a toast.
All right, let's drink whiskey.
Yeah.
What are we drinking first?
Let's start with Jim Beam in
Let's
honor.
start with Jim Beam. Of
Yeah.
course.
This
This is great.
And I will let you do the honors. So
Oh.
Why not?
We're so grateful that you guys came on and this handover thing. This is very lovely.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
we
Very
couldn't
honored.
be happier for you.
Thank you.
We're very excited.
It's still
This
kind
is
of,
great.
Still hasn't fully, settled in yet, but
I mean,
I'm sure I kept having moments all day. I was like, Matt, I just had a moment.
Ray's been shadowing the commercial team as well as myself, so we've got a few days of market together. And he did. We were doing a training on premise, and he just had this moment. He just looked over. He's like, "I'm having a moment. This is real. This is happening. This is what we're doing." So we cleared
right.
I couldn't
glasses
stop
and-
closing my eyes. I was like, Matt, I'm having a moment.
That's so great.
So cheers.
I love it.
Cheers, folks.
Yeah, in the Kentucky form, we gotta say you come as come as a friend. See, I've been off the
Leave his
desk for
family.
how long?
I know I know.
Come as a friend, leave his family.
Magic.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, that was very lovely. I feel we've had a few historic moments on this podcast, but that was definitely one of them.
Does that just not bring us back to 2015?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what a great trip that was.
Oh, my gosh.
I was just with Sleepy Gary over the weekend. He came
Have we,
over
ever,
and,
have we ever told the Sleepy Graveyard during the podcast? I feel like we
I
haven't.
think we've touched on it.
I think we should tell the whole story, because I think back then we were a little shy about it because we weren't sure if Sleepy Gary knew about the story.
And now we know
He knows that he does not
And he
care.
embraces it,
Yeah.
exactly. So we're
As he says, well, I sleep naked. Like, by the way, punchline.
Good. Spoiler alert.
So we have this beautiful Airbnb in Kentucky.
It's beautiful.
Up
Yeah.
in,
Gorgeous.
just north of Germantown, up on the hillside.
4 floors, yeah.
4 floors. Very interesting layout. There was definitely the side doors for the servants' quarters, which was odd.
Yeah, it's all
I'd explain
Kentucky,
that.
yeah.
But there was 7 or 8 of us, all whiskey enthusiasts, and we made it our base camp, and we're going to different distilleries back and forth. Good buddy of mine who will be called Sleepy Gary. He came on the trip. He was a former representative with Beam. Interesting cat, we can all say. Likes his bourbon, likes to have a good time. Always likes to throw a comment in at the worst possible time as well. But
Can we note the time he heckled the reference? Who was the best distiller for Heaven Hill? Have you won any awards for your whiskey?
so that's right. We went to see Bernie and do the whole bluegrass thing with Hickory Vaught.
Yes.
And it was actually it was Craig Beam, Parker Beam's son.
That's right, it was Craig Beam.
Yes, he did. He waited. Have your whiskeys won any awards? Gary, sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Yes, it's won awards. Let's talk later. But he decided Jamie had to come home early because you had some
a wedding.
an engagement.
Yes.
Back in Toronto. And you had a pretty nice room.
I had the best
Whereas,
room. Of course, I was the only girl on the trip, so I snagged it right away. Or you guys were actually you can have
you take your pick.
Yeah. So I obviously took the nicest room. It was at the very end of this long hallway, the last door, and it had a sink in it, and it was super private, and it was perfect.
Super private when you close the door.
When you close the door, which is funny because as in many old houses, when you close a door and the latch doesn't quite click in, you have to close it and then push it till you hear it click. So I learned early on in the trip that was the key to that. I will let you continue.
Precursor, yeah. So Jamie goes home. Sleepy Gary has been upstairs in the attic with another roommate, and they're actually sharing it. They're bunking together they're, a couple of kids having a sleepover. So as soon as he realizes there's an extra bed available, of course, we're out pretty late that night. I'll come back, wake up in the morning, and that door that latches with a little bit of extra oomph is wide open, and Sleepy Gary is buck naked on the bed,
on top
laying
of the sheets.
over on top of the sheets, the sun gleaming on his white butt, and I think Glenford might have been the first to see him, or was it yourself?
I think I saw him first. I went to the bathroom and got up, turned left, and you had to turn left to go to the bathroom. And all you saw was the sun rising because it was kind of late morning. The sun was rising. The curtains were closed, but you know how the curtains aren't fully closed. The sun kind of got through a little bit, and all I just saw was that Sleepy Gary's flesh, just the roundness of his butt as the sun kind of. Anyway, it was very. It
was polarizing.
It was very polarizing.
I got a lot of text messages at the airport. They're like, Jamie, there's someone in your bed. It's not you.
Keep in mind, Jamie's checked out. She's not coming back to that bed.
No, I'm not coming back to the bed.
She's still weirded and grossed out.
Oh man, it's an Airbnb. No one changed those sheets. Yeah. And I had drank a few nights. I had those sweaty drunk sleeps. And so
he did sleep on top of the covers, so I mean,
that's that's for him for sure, because definitely I would not have.
Yeah, no, it was, all of us had that experience. We all kind of looked forward, and that was that.
That's one of the stories we can tell from that trip.
Yeah.
The only story.
Probably
Oh,
the
I
only
wish I
story.
brought some
And it
cereal.
still has bare butts in it.
Wait.
So
Gatorade bottle or water bottle?
Oh, that's another good Sleepy Gary story.
At a distillery that shall remain unnamed.
Oh, right, we can't name this at all.
We ended up on a certain floor with some open casks, and the person who was so generous to take us up there said, well, do you have anything you can put the whiskey in? Gary, on it. Runs downstairs, 8 flights. We're on the 8th floor. Of
I didn't think Gary would run ever.
Gary moved.
He moved. Man.
And he went all the way down. He got all the way back up. So, Gatorade or water? And the distiller goes, well, unless you want your whiskey to taste like Gatorade. Fair point. Here's the water bottle. And we drank that cask strength back at the house that night in the kitchen. And I'm pretty sure in the wee hours, we put it on cornflakes.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was good whiskey.
Yeah, that was after.
You ready for Kentucky, buddy?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Bring it on.
Oh, Ray's going to take us next
Daisy.
year. That's
Ray's your ambassador.
Ray, we're going to be compared to Matt. It's going to be wonderful.
I'm getting used to that. Yeah. It's okay.
He's going to pave a new trail.
Yeah. We're just different, that's all.
Well, I got two more tattoos to work on. That's one change for sure.
I've got him
body's a
an
temple.
appointment in New Orleans yet. He doesn't know it. But
Oh, that's good. Are you guys going to New Orleans for Tails?
I'm going to pop down for my annual tattoo and to see everyone. Not going to be participating so much in the everything this year, but I've made that pilgrimage for almost a decade.
Going to be there with you, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. We've got to coordinate which weekend.
Yeah.
Sure, because I'm going to come a little bit before, but
Okay. Yeah.
I can't not go to New Orleans.
Yeah, right.
I mean, why wouldn't you want to go sweat buckets?
We're at the
Sweaty.
new organizer of Tales in the Cocktail on the next podcast that's being recorded tomorrow, actually.
That's right.
So yeah, we're going to be doing that, talking about that event. So that'll be fun. Sweet. Cool. Well, there we go. So that's Jim Beam.
Yep.
You these trips pretty frequently down to Kentucky. This must have been your favorite part of your job, is to do those
It
trips.
was. And to bring a little touch of Kentucky back to Canada, but I curated almost 30 trips in 7.5 years.
Yeah.
Used to go down almost quarterly, and in some years a little bit less, some years a little bit more. But it was such a rewarding part of the gig, and it's all about the Kentucky people. It's about the folks that make the whiskeys at the distillery. It's a big family, and that's I mean that hospitality down there is something pretty amazing. So it's kind of sad to think that I won't be doing that as often anymore. But hey, I get to go to Scotland. But I will be coming. There's going to be a trip or two that I'm going to be joining you for.
Oh, I'm sure we can work something out.
I literally live 6 hours door to door from my house to
Oh,
Jim
that's
Beam's
right, you
doorstep.
do.
So
Yeah,
it's,
Windsor. Yeah.
I've seen you drive, I believe that. Yeah.
Right.
That was stopping for lunch and everything.
I got it timed. For sure. But you're going to be heading down for your immersion probably at the end of the summer, right? Towards September.
And end of summer, start of fall. Yeah. So yeah,
You'll be working at the distilleries. You'll be actually making whiskey. You're working with Dave Pudlow, the whiskey professor at Maker's Mark. Working with Jane Bowie,
Hi, Jane.
Hi, Jane. Shout out to Jane. I mean, she created that private barrel select program. She's all about the taking that Maker's 46
previous
next
guest on
level.
the podcast, yeah.
And then Freddie and Fred Jr. at Jim Beam. You're gonna have some
looking forward
fun
to it,
afternoons
man.
at the
Yeah.
Fred's Garage down on down in Bardstown there, and attending a few barbecues and meeting some local bourbon royalty.
I'm sure you might have a couple nips here and there.
Yep.
Here and there. Sure.
See Fred pouring that bottle of Booker's on the. You guys were there one afternoon we did that, right? Oops, never mind. Okay.
No, what else did I miss?
You went home early.
I know.
The oil drum that is actually cut in half as a barbecue. They bring out these crazy pork chops, and for the last 4 minutes of grilling, they ring the fire bell, and Fred comes out and pours a whole bottle of Booker's on the grill, and that just caramelizes everything. And you just smell the bourbon. It's it's pretty special.
It sounds all right, I guess. I don't
This
know.
is my favorite part of Kentucky. The mixture of booze and food is just there, like that.
Bourbon barbecue.
Oh,
It's
it's
the way of
there.
life.
And it's not a gimmick like you sometimes see places. It's actually there. Like it's done in a wonderful way. Yeah.
It's a tradition for sure.
Yeah. Amazing. So Ray, what's your plan?
What are you most excited about?
yeah,
Like, what's getting you jazzed? What are you up next looking forward to doing?
Honestly, it's kind of hard to answer. Like it's still setting in, right?
Yeah.
Like it's still, I'm kind of half expecting to wake up in the morning and go back to work in the hotel.
Right.
Like it still kind of feels like, it's just, it hasn't really set in. I'm really looking forward to getting into all the rest of the markets outside of, obviously I love Toronto, but like actually seeing the rest of the country and, spreading the gospel as the man says over there.
Spread the gospel.
And just kind of getting out and talking about whiskey, right? And, it's still so hard for me to process everything, right? Like, I'm just really looking forward to that. Looking forward to kind of hopefully putting in some good initiatives within the country for bartenders and stuff like that, and kind of really kind of building a brand through the on-premise end of things.
Yeah.
trying not to screw up too bad.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I mean, a lot of your jobs has to do with working with bartenders, and more so sometimes than even consumers, because consumers go to conferences and things like that to whiskey shows. But like your work with bartenders is crucial. I mean, that's really what pushes whiskey forward. It makes it available for the rest of us that want to just sip it neat.
For sure.
Not that there aren't a lot of great bars like you used to manage that have whiskey for neat sipping, but still, that's a big part of the job. And you were a bartender, so this is great.
It's kind of like just natural progression, right? And it's true. I mean, I've been on the other side for better part of 2 decades, right? So like I know how I feel or felt when people like Matt or Jamie would come in and actually give us the knowledge around that brand, and you're more confident in your sell, you're more confident in even recommending, right? And it just builds that entire mental repertoire. So when people come in and say like, this is what I like, you're not going Jim Beam because Jim Beam were in and they give you a little tasting or something like that. You're doing it because this is what they're looking for, right? And you only know that because people like us come in and share that knowledge, right? So I'm really looking forward to kind of bringing that to the bars and having fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the role because I mean I think you're not to be confused with sales, because your job isn't necessarily sales; it's more education and kind of talking about the brand and bringing forward unique characteristics what make the brands unique to the industry. But you're not necessarily there as a salesperson. You're not getting commission for sales of bottles. You're there purely to educate and kind of talk about the brand.
Yeah,
it's the best kind of job. I mean, it really is. Yeah.
There are worse ways to spend a life. I'm starting to realize that pretty quickly. Yeah.
I gotta say, it's a dream job after all these years.
Yeah. Well, that's what you said to me earlier on. You still have those like pinch me.
Yeah. Yeah. They're
we get paid to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true though. Like you do, like there is like every time there's a moment where you're like, oh man, like I'm super like wiped, or like, and then you're just like, meh.
Yeah, it's true.
Fine.
That is the other part of this. You don't sleep. You travel a lot. It's a lot of work. It's not easy. It's
still work
it's
at
still
the end of the
work,
day.
yeah.
Like, but when you sort of have that like moment where you're like, oh man, then you got to give your head a shake and be like, no.
Sometimes that's fueled by whiskey that'll get you going to the next stage, but it's those times when it's the consumer's passion. Right?
Yeah.
When you're tired, it's time to leave the show, it's time to pack up and get ready for the next gig.
Yeah.
But then you meet that person that is very passionate and you're like, yes, I have 15 more minutes.
Yeah.
That turns into 2 hours.
It does. And then you get back to like your hotel and you're like jacked, right? And you're like, then all of a sudden you're by yourself in your room and you're like, oh no.
And you gotta be up in 6 hours or 5 hours.
And my plane's leaving in like 3 hours. I gotta go. I haven't packed yet. And then you're still like, you're so amped on the whole night. So like, I think that's one of the things is, that's.
I'm having a moment.
Oh yeah, that's so great.
Should we give you a moment?
It's okay, man. It's really emotional.
No, it's so great. And it's really great to have, and I think we're really lucky in Canada in terms of our brand ambassador community that we have a bunch of people that first of all get along so well.
It's awesome.
That really love each other and that are truly passionate about what they do, that are, that really love whiskey and love to talk about it. And I think it shows. And I think, people, when they see us and when they comment, like my colleagues from across the world are like, oh, all the brand ambassadors in Canada are so much fun. Like, when we had all the Bob Henny brand ambassadors from across the globe in Victoria, like they were just like, oh, the Canadian brand ambassadors.
How many did you have? 17?
We had 13 brand ambassadors, and then we had like our global marketing person. We just had like a collection from global. So I think in total there was like on our team like 17 people.
That was
but
good
brand
times.
ambassador, it was.
I had FaceTime with every one of your ambassadors.
Oh yeah,
like, sharing drams and telling stories, finding out where they're from.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're honestly, I couldn't. I am so obsessed with all of them. Like it's such a great team to work on, and they love all the Canadian brand ambassadors. Like everyone like loves each other up here. Like there's no sense of competition between brands. Like
there's nobody that you wouldn't want to be in a room with.
Yeah.
Which
We're
is
really lucky.
You look at like probably about 20, 25 ambassadors across the board.
In the last 2 years, I've lost count.
Yeah.
But like to have that amount of people and kind of go, I'd be happy sitting beside any of these people on a flight.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, which happens sometimes when it's in Fredericton, especially. I like walk on the plane. I'm like, oh my God, there are 6 brand ambassadors here going to New Brunswick all at the same time. Like, this plane will explode with all the whiskey that's underneath right now. If anything
I can't
happens.
think of how many times I've ran into Beth Havers at airports randomly, just high five.
Yeah, exactly. What's going on?
Victoria.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, I heard the Beth
everyone's
like, hey, what's
flying
going on? And Matt's like, oh,
Yeah.
It's like a love fest. It's
The
really
only time I
nice.
get to see Dave Mitten is at an airport.
Yeah.
Hey, reach in the north.
Exactly. And like, I think we all feel that way. So like, we're welcome. Like, this is like officially welcome. Like, you were always there, and because your whiskey presence is so huge and known, and everyone knows who you are, and you've probably worked for every brand under the sun. But to have you officially, on board is really exciting.
Awesome.
And
Thank
really,
you.
really excited for you.
So exciting.
Aw, it's just 11 here.
Yeah.
It's so cute. We're so adorable.
Next whiskey?
Let's do it. What's
It's
next?
just
I
going to
think,
get more and more
you're up,
sappy
Mr.
as we
Jones.
go along.
I'm going to go Toki next.
This one is you, buddy.
So yeah, my
Someone's
change
on
in
crying
portfolio,
right into this one.
right? Oh, there's still 3 to go.
I think someone's going to cry.
Yeah.
It might be
Getting
me.
a little weepy.
And if it is, I apologize. It's been a couple long days.
You have an official moment.
Yeah,
Just calm himself.
as you said in the car, get there before anybody else does, right? It's like putting yourself before anybody has a chance.
That's it.
So tell us about Toki. So this is in your portfolio now.
So it's been, I've got these venerable whiskeys from all of these distilleries from 3 different countries, single malt and blends. Been following the Suntory path for quite a few years. I got to tour the distillery in 2006 when I lived in Japan. And this is long before I ever worked for the company. And so I was very curious about Japanese whiskey back then, but to now have this as part of the portfolio and all the changes that have happened at Beam, I wish I could dive deeper into Yamazaki and Hakushu and all the wonderful age statements. I mean, they're stateside, but in Ontario, we have this wonderful blend Toki, which is the best of all those worlds. We have 3 distilleries, Yamazaki, Hakushu, and Chita, Grain Whiskey Distillery. Very young whiskey. Every drop in here is under 10 years old. This is one of my favorite summer whiskeys. And 43% ABV, still has a nice spice and bite to it, but it's that, tree fruit, green apples and pears. Little hints and wisps of smoke, because there's a little peated component in here, but that bourbon vanilla from the ex-bourbon barrels as well. And very approachable summer style whiskey. And of course, that Mizuwari Japanese highball.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, absolutely. Proper.
That's my summer drink.
I think I've had so many of those highballs. I just taste this. I'm like, oh yeah, the highball.
It's fresh. Yeah, it brings me right back.
Brings me right back to a patio somewhere and drinking that. Yeah, that's true. It's pretty rare in Ontario, but you can get Japanese whiskey pretty much everywhere else in the world. Give us the kind of the 2-minute spiel on the brand and what makes Japanese whiskey special.
So this company in particular innovated the category. Shinjiro Tori was the founder of Suntory. He started off as a humble wine merchant in Osaka, Japan back in 1899, and he developed a thirst for Scotch whiskey, which is being imported to Japan, but nobody could afford it. It was uber expensive. So he had this dream of creating a Japanese whiskey that Japanese people could be proud of as well. So he did a lot of research, and in 1919, he sent his lead chemist, Masataka Takatsuru-san, to Scotland, where he completely immersed himself in the Scottish culture as well as whiskey, and brought that back to Japan, and in 1923 helped establish Yamazaki, the world's first Japanese whiskey distillery. Within a couple of years, he actually parted ways with the Suntory family, and he went up and started Nikka up in the north, in Hokkaido, and went in a different direction with their whiskeys. But these are the 2 venerable Japanese whiskey houses, and they all started really together with the same passion. So there are other whiskey distilleries now, and of course in Japan, and as the Suntory whiskeys and Nikka whiskeys winning a lot of awards and getting a lot more world acclaim, it has brought the world's focus, as we know. 2013, Yamazaki Sherry Cask blew up, and that's around the time when it was really hard to get Japanese whiskey anywhere, especially with an age statement. So it's just created such a demand for it that we're waiting for those stocks to age for Canada.
Yes.
Yeah, what I like about the story is that it is whiskey inspired by Scotland, but there's also that local component with the local grains, and for the blended whiskeys, it'll be like, oh, the single malts, but the Japanese blended whiskeys are really where a lot of that flavor comes from. The hibikis, the 12, the 17, so on, like that. That's where the flavor comes in. They're all blended. They
took blends. That blending art to a whole different level.
Yeah,
they're really good.
Yeah.
And our blender is the conductor to the orchestra, the chef to the ingredients. We've got over 100 and close to 150 different whiskeys produced at 3 different distilleries. You blend those all together to get different flavor profiles. That is, of course, the art of blending, but they've taken it to such a new level. They actually have the same thing for lunch every day.
That's the science part of the story.
Yeah, to make sure it doesn't mess with the senses. And then, of course, the single malts. The first single malt came out in 1984, the Yamazaki. Yeah. So they've really built quite a foundation for those single malts as well. But those are the hearts of these blends too.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah. Very cool. Wonderful. And so your favorite drink? What's your quick recipe for the Toki highball?
Quick and easy. A typical highball is 3 parts of your mix to 1 part of your spirit. I'll put like 1.5 ounces of Toki. Fill the glass with ice. You can also put like a lemon zest or orange zest or grapefruit zest in there as well to accent that citrus. Fill the glass with ice. Top it with soda water, and you're done.
Perfect.
Doesn't get any easier than that. And Suntory really popularized the highball in Japan back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Now there are just highball bars where you go to a Suntory or even a Jim Beam highball bar, and that's all it's being served are highballs. And it's just, especially like in an airport, it's such a refreshing, quick. You get the flavor, you get the lift from the effervescence of the bubbles. It's refreshing, and then you're
effortless.
It is.
Yeah.
It's great.
And the name highball, where does that come from?
So there's a couple of versions. One has to do with trains. When a train is coming down the track, it had to do with the flags. I've heard 2 different versions of this. One is to do with the flags. If the train was coming full speed through, they would put up the high flag, and that'd be highball. So you get out of the way, the train's coming through. Low ball would mean the train's going to be slowing down and coming to a stop. I've also heard a version where it's actually, there was knobs in the train that the engineer would pull. One was a high ball, one was a low ball. So basically, it just denoted the speed at which you were drinking. So low ball would be no mix. High ball, you're going to mix it and slow it down, which is in contrast to what I just said about a high ball going faster. But
I heard the highball was like, the other story would be like that's when they would serve dinner and the bar cart was open and that kind of thing as well. Like when this train reached a consistent speed, you're like, oh, the bar's open. And then when it starts slowing down, the low ball, same idea.
So
take
something
your
to do with trains.
It has something to do with trains.
Highball,
Not the old
pick up your
Via Rail,
glass.
though.
We're going fast. Low ball, you can put your glass down.
that's it.
There you go.
Perhaps we got to do some more research on that, but I remember reading that years ago. That's what stuck.
But the train, the train's amazing. All right.
That's such a whiskey sort of story to tell, though. Like it's like, I
Where's
heard
bourbon
this.
come from?
Yeah, I heard this version. I heard about charred casks and why they use charred casks. It's some guy that had. This reminds me. Have you guys seen Neat, the bourbon movie yet?
No.
So there's like a part where they've got Steve Zahn sitting in a chair and they're like, and basically he's like, oh, bourbon came from, or charred cask came from this guy who had, burnt down his warehouse or whatever, and a bunch of his casks got charred. Or it's the guy that had a bunch of fish and pickles in his casks and he wanted to reuse them, so he charred them on the inside to get rid of the flavor for whatever. Or it was, and then like this, like when we were talking with our friend who wrote the book, sorry guys, my brain is so fried today because all I can think of is like Polonaise and like alpha amylase, which is
not the
horrible.
alpha amylase.
Someone wrote an exam.
But when we were talking about Bourbon Veach, now I've got his thank you. I got his Twitter handle in my head. on the way. So yeah, when he was talking about where bourbon came from, and he's like, well, it's like the lore says it comes from here, but it could come from here, but it could come from here. So in whiskey, and it's like, oh, the oldest distillery is this distillery, but the oldest legal distillery is this distillery. But so listen, just take whatever story you got and just run with it.
Right. Just make it a funny story. Make it entertaining.
Exactly,
That's it.
and
That's
then
all
you're good to go.
Just in Kentucky, you got to be careful which story you tell.
That's right.
That
yes.
is true.
That's true.
Just
Michael
saying
Beach with
nothing.
bourbon, the origin of when Kentucky whiskey was called bourbon. Was it Bourbon County or was it Bourbon Street, New Orleans?
Right.
He's got supporting arguments for both.
Yeah.
But you don't tell the Bourbon New Orleans story in Kentucky.
Yeah.
That's right.
Two books of Bourbon,
Good too.
Bourbon County. Write that down.
I'm going to make a note.
It is
of
100% Bourbon County.
Yeah.
Who wants to talk about bakers? I'm going to hand this over to the
Please.
Um,
This is great.
This is I think the thing I'm most excited about in this role.
Yay.
I tried Baker's for the first time a couple of years ago. I can't remember how many years ago, but within the last like 6 years maybe. And I was kind of just getting my feet wet in the whole idea of bourbon. I mean, I tried a couple of the big boys over the course of the years, but you know, just it wasn't something that was very, very readily available, especially in Ireland, right? And, you know, when I moved over here, I was trying my best to keep the, you know, the liquor intake down as much as possible because, you know, Irish guy on his own in a foreign country could end pretty badly.
Little joke, come on. Irishman walks into a bar.
Yeah, get arrested. But I tried Baker's, first time I was down in the States, and it was just one of those like perfect moments of, oh wow, this is bourbon. Okay, cool. And I think I had like maybe 2 or 3 of them that night. They didn't go crazy.
Yeah.
And just couldn't stop thinking about it. And it was years before I saw it again. Like I didn't see it again until we opened Char.
Yeah.
And then I was down in Queen's Quay and there was a bottle on the shelf and I was like, I'm gonna pick that up. And it gradually became like my favorite bourbon. And now to actually be
repping it.
It's kind of wild.
I love it.
But fantastic. Little high.
No, I'm having a moment.
You're having a moment?
Watching you open this. Tell me about your love of Baker's. This is fantastic.
Hello, beautiful.
Well, I'll ask the questions that our audience is going to want to answer. What's the difference between Baker's and Booker's? Because they're both high-proof bourbons,
Both
right?
high-proof. Baker's is lower on the proof, 53.5, I think. Yeah. Whereas Booker's is coming in at like 62, 63-ish.
Whatever it ends up.
Whatever it ends up at.
Yep.
Yeah. Same juice. Yeah.
Yep,
juice.
same mash bill.
Yeah.
There's one thing in particular, Baker Beam, he had his own proprietary jug strain.
Well, it's
And
the
that's
yeast,
what-
yeah.
That's what changes the...
But yeah, like, it's just there. You know what I mean? I've been reading a lot about the Beam family in the last couple of days. Just trying to, I was saying to Matt yesterday, like...
We had a good 2-hour conversation.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Oh, yeah. And like, with anything, I need to really kind of immerse myself in not just the company, like the company and the product, but the people actually behind it, and because that's the only way I can relate to anything really. And just like the stories that Fred knows, like when he talks about Baker Beam, it's always done with this, like it's almost like a kid looking up to that cool older cousin, right? Like, you know, and I want to be like you type thing.
Yeah.
And he always, like, he talks about him with great reverence and great, like, you know, this was the dude. And I think that shows through the product, because man, this is a big, strong boy, but still, you know, it's still very approachable, right?
I always refer to Baker's as an occasion for me. It's always Thanksgiving. It's always Christmas. The baking spice in there obviously has a lot to it. But because Beam doesn't put a lot behind it in terms of marketing, it's about discovery.
Yeah.
And those that know it and love it, they are fanatics. And I know a lot of our ambassadors in the U.S. that they gravitate towards Baker's as well.
That's how Booker started, right? It was kind of that, as not as a big, you know, it was undercovers, not as much promotion behind it, and then Booker's became so big.
That was the first ever small batch. I mean, before small batch was a thing in the whiskey world, it was Booker No saying, "This is the whiskey that comes from the center cut, uncut, unfiltered." And he didn't like single barrel bourbon because he felt it too inconsistent. He's not wrong about that. Of course, we do single barrels now. But he would blend his favorite barrels together and add no water. So every batch would be a different proof. And it was uncut, unfiltered, straight from the barrel. One of the best stories about Baker and the bourbon itself, Mark Gillespie, when he was interviewing him for Whiskey Cast at the Bourbon Hall of Fame, when he was I can't remember if he was being inducted, I was here, Parker was being inducted, but he asked him the story. He said, "Baker, you've got this whiskey. You're one of a handful of master distillers that has your name on a bottle. Your cousin Booker created the category. Tell us, what's the story behind Baker's?" He looked at Mark and he said, "Well, my cousin Booker called me up. He asked me if he could put my name on the bottle. I said, yes." That just sums up Baker.
That's fantastic.
His cousin Booker with a big baritone voice, big personality. You hear him coming down the hall. You know, Baker was soft-spoken, but he was the lifeblood of those distilleries. When Booker was off traveling the world, preaching the gospel and running the Booker No plant, it was Baker that was turning on the lights, firing up the stills, and he was definitely, or is, a venerable distiller in his own right. He's retired now. I think he just turned 84 this year, but Left a legacy of a beautiful whiskey, and so humble to just say my cousin said he put my name on it, but it was his East strain, it was his whiskey.
Amazing.
I don't your name on a bottle, like
Right?
Jonesy.
One day, buddy. One day.
It's a very bourbon thing to do. It's not so much in single malts, right?
You got Booker, you got Elmer T. Lee, who's
Yeah,
passed.
Blanton's.
Parker.
Taylor.
Parker's now passed. But even like contemporary distillers.
Yeah. No, that's true. Yeah.
Blanton's.
Yeah.
So Russell, Jimmy Russell.
Yes.
Russell's Reserve. So there's only a handful that make it to that stage. And these are the legends. Booker's right up there.
So they use a different yeast strain for Bakers.
Yeah, it was Baker's own proprietary yeast strain that he kept domesticated and did for his own little projects.
Wow.
And someone got to taste it, probably Booker.
Yeah.
And said, we need to put this in a bottle. And the rest is history,
Wow.
Opens really well.
Yeah, it does. It actually does come off a little harsh at first, but then you give it like a few minutes.
It's
and
lively.
Boom.
It's definitely lively.
The nuttiness comes through. It's nice. The caramels come through with just the spiciness that, like I said, the baking kind of spices are really wonderful.
I joke between this one and Maker's 46 being kind of the cognacs of bourbon. Because they have that wonderful cellar baking spice to it.
It's not like chocolate sweetness that comes in right on the back end, like just.
It just kind of, as it's kind of fading a little bit, you start to, right, almost like a dark chocolate right in the back of the tongue.
Like, not like bitter, but like in that pleasant way that dark chocolate is bitter, but just that like slight,
And the finish is great.
I haven't had this in a long time.
Stays here,
I can feel myself getting more.
There you go. There you go.
Strange thing is, I've actually stopped sweating, which is it's a little concerning.
Another problem.
But it's all right. I'll seek medical help if it becomes.
Those have been asking me if I drink bourbon at all anymore, if I just drink single malts. I still love my bourbon.
For sure.
Team whiskey.
100%. Yeah, I know I get asked about that a lot. They're like, when are you going to change your name to Scotch thing? And I was like,
single malt thing.
I think it's just, I think
That's
it's just
Scotch thang.
thang.
Yeah.
I was like, I think it's just going to stay. It's just going to keep it as bourbon thing. Yeah.
I've got a new handle.
You do. That's true.
You do.
Yes.
So, as Beam Bourbon Ambassador, I'm not Beam Bourbon Canada. Are we going to stick with
Beam
that
Bourbon
for you?
Canada,
So, Ray's taking the reins on that one, and then World Whiskey. World Whiskey no E with a whiskey with an E.
Nice.
To just differentiate from my Whiskey Chef account. Still be posting a lot of cool stuff on Whiskey Chef, but this will be more the brand specific account now.
Yeah. Very cool.
Instagram. So.
Which one do you use the live videos? What's the live videos on? Which account do you use the?
Well, when my whole immersion in Scotland, it was all on Whiskey Chef.
Whiskey Chef,
but a lot of that will be like my upcoming trips to Scotland. On the new handle as well.
Awesome.
Which is happening soon. So you're going to be, you're going to go to Scotland soon. And
Festival of Malt Music.
Oh man, you're going to have such a great time.
I can't wait. I'm actually working Lefroy Day. I'll be helping out with Sherilyn Jackson and Dan Woolley, actually serving the cocktails for the Friends of Lefroy, which is an honor.
that's amazing.
And then hopefully doing something with Bemore Day as well. But then I'll be on the island to hang out for Brooklady Day and go down to Ardbeg Day and really get the collegiate feel of the island and see all the different producers. I've got about 5 days, and then jump over to Ireland to visit Mum in Dublin. Get some catch-up time with my mom, and then head over to Cooley and Kilbeggan.
Oh wow!
And you went in the winter last time?
I didn't make it to Ireland. The company actually ended up cutting that one short. But
Right.
I was in for my immersion on Islay in February.
Yes, so this will be slightly nicer.
Wonderful time of year.
Yeah. I've done Scotland in February too.
Flight and or drive there.
Yeah.
Doesn't get windy at all, eh?
Not at all. No. You don't like the weather on Islay? Wait 5 minutes. That's all. The thing. There was a snowstorm in Canada. Late getting into Heathrow. Missed the flight to Islay from Glasgow. I know we talked about this in person, so I'll just put it out here. Kind of anticipated this was going to happen, so someone from the company advised me, you should line up a car just in case this happens, and it did happen. So this lovely Scottish gentleman drove me all through Loch Lomond Park, National Park, all the way to a little town called Kennecraig, which is about almost a 3-hour drive. On the way, this is the first big snowstorm they'd had in like a decade. This is before the beast from the east actually came and shut down the country about 3 weeks. We thought it was bad when I was there. That was nothing compared to what they got hit with after I left. But a car flipped on its back like a turtle, completely cut us off. So we were 45 minutes late getting to the ferry. So what do? Well, you get upset? No. You go down to the local pub, you get some fish and chips, you start ordering whiskey, and then you start up conversations with the locals.
Exactly.
I had just as much difficulty understanding them as they did me with the dialect, but we had a blast. And then I was on that ferry 7 o'clock the next morning, freezing rain. I'm out at the hull of the ferry like it's the Titanic.
Proper Canadian. Very well done.
These guys, these tradesmen, I'm not sure exactly, maybe they were on some oil wells, but they were coming back to the island for the day, and they're just laughing up a storm. Look at the Canadian out there in the freezing rain. Yeah. But as they're coming down around the southern peninsula of Isla, and all of a sudden, you know, Ardbeg reveals itself, and you see like a full, and then of course I take a picture as they're coming around Lefroy. I get the L-A. L-A-F-H. L-A-F-H-R-O. I got a picture as they're completely coming around the peninsula, and I was just giddy. So, I mean, Beaumont is a venerable. I absolutely love Beaumont. I love introducing folks to Isla. Beaumont. Lefroy is just that whole other level with that peat. That for my journey with peat, with single malt, it was a journey. 2013, 3 years in with the company, I couldn't finish a glass.
Yeah, you're one of the legitimate people that like, because I like peat the moment I tasted it, but a lot of people never try it once and hate it. But you've converted. You were a convert. That's amazing. Tell the story.
As a bourbon guy, loving the sweet notes and being able to, it was all about mixability. And I found Lefroy very difficult to mix. And we used to tour around with Simon Brooking, our global ambassador, who was an amazing brand ambassador. And I mean, he embodies Scotland, he embodies the whole tradition, but he lives and breathes Lefroy. He first set me hip to the fact that Lefroy is the American cask that we use is actually Maker's Mark. So I started, oh, wow. And then, of course, Sam Ross with his international sensation, the penicillin cocktail. So I'm like, oh, right, there's a lot of potential here. Yes. But I still couldn't finish a glass.
Yeah.
Then, gradually over time, by 2015, I started developing this itch that only Lefroy could scratch. And now it is one of my favorite single malts and distilleries as well. So what we have here is the Triple Wood, which is basically there's a lot of triple variations out there, 3 wood, triple cast, triple wood, but
variations, okay.
I know there's a chicken versus an egg story here. For sure.
Always there.
Let's break down the schema for us for a little bit. When he first invented the process of using multiple wood varieties in a single pod.
We started this finishing thing anyway.
And Matt Jones just said this was a chicken and egg scenario, where really it was Belvini that actually did it. And Lefroy came in later and said, yeah, that's a good idea. That's all
We're just going to continue to record after we leave.
Unless you're Glenmorangie.
I never said who was the chicken or the egg.
Unless you're Glenmorangie and Belvini are in the same room, then they'll also debate who invented the first double. Anyway, back to the program.
We're focusing on the whiskey.
I like that. That was good. That was a good little side. Yeah, well done. Well done.
Well played, sir.
Thank you.
So quarter cask plus sherry finish. So just under 10 years in American cask, finished in that quarter cask with that more wood contact, a lot more heavier tannin, the Wild Child that is quarter cask, and then finished off with sherry, so that sweetness at the end.
Yeah. Sure. And Lefroy is one of the few distilleries that uses this quarter casks, which are half bourbon size, quarter sherry butt. Is that correct?
It's actually a quarter of a sherry butt, 500 milliliters down to 125.
Yeah. So
whereas a bourbon's about 200.
Yeah.
So yeah. Ardmore and Lefroy were the two from Bean. I know other companies have played with it, but those are the two that lasted with our company. The Ardmore, is it the Legacy? Legacy, and then the one that's not the LCBO, but I still have in my cupboard, and then the Lefroy quarter cask.
Yeah.
And they brought that old tradition of a European cask that was small enough to put on the back of a donkey or horse without breaking its back. It's really about
nice.
There's transport.
Right?
Why did they call it a donkey cast? I mean, what a lost
The Bryan donkey cast. That's more of a Balvenie thing, I think.
I actually think Donkey Cat sounds a little more Ardbeg, to be fair. They really like those fun names, right? The alligator, yeah. Got to get Bryan here. It could be an Ardbeg thing. Yeah, they're a little more playful in the name realm.
Let's call Rui right now.
Yeah.
Let's call Rui and see.
Exactly. That's
That'd be a donkey cast.
Donkey Cat.
Hey, let it sink in for a moment.
Mark, what is
That's why I was like, it's quite the pour he gave me. No, it's a Mark Bylock pour.
No, you just drank it faster.
No, he got the best pour. Look at that.
You're welcome.
Thanks, buddy.
Aw.
Well, and I mean,
do.
Lefroy's got to be one of the one of Whiskey Geek's favorites whiskeys, because they do. There's a lot of variation. But if you like peated whiskeys, you'll start with Lagavulin. You'll love your Ardbegs, but like pretty much everybody loves Lefroy. It seems to be that kind of like. Also, everybody hates Lefroy. If you really hate peat, this is not the whiskey for
It's
you.
like coriander or cilantro can completely split the room.
Exactly, split the room.
Yeah.
And I love that. I've said this before on the podcast, but I love how Lefroy just embraces that. Like they just
They own it.
What does that have?
They just own it. Yeah.
Opinions welcome, good or bad.
Some of my favorites are painted on the distillery walls when you first get there, right by the visitor center on the outside. It says, Lefroy, a vegan's answer to a life without bacon. And inside it says, Lefroy, like kissing a mermaid that said barbecue for dinner. These are painted.
Actually, that's perfect. Yeah.
The strange thing with peated whiskey, though, and Lefroy, I think, is the one that really kind of brings it out the most, is that, like, you love, like, if you like peated whiskey, it's like, Lefroy is your go-to, right? But it's kind of almost everything that you would hate as a child. Like as like the medicinal, like the iodine-y, like, you know, like even just the smell. I mean, I grew up in a bog, right? And like, so to me, the smell of like turf and burning peat and stuff like that, that's his home, right? That's like, it's one of the most comforting smells in the world. But I remember like cousins would come down from Dublin and places like that and be like, what's that? Yeah, like it's just one of those things that it's almost, everything that you would hate as a child. Now when you get older, you're like, that's all I want.
Translate to something.
All I want, right? Like, I love it.
Yeah,
that's great.
Lefroy's got a distinct smoke to it. I mean, Ardbeg does peat higher in the actual grains. Well, I mean, Lefroy produces about 20% of our floor maltings in our kiln that has this creosote element to it. That you're not. There's an element of terroir from the distillery.
Yeah.
And it also,
oily kind of.
John Campbell does his cuts. Sorry.
That oily kind of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just think of that chimney, that briny, oily chimney, right?
Yeah.
And then the cuts, they're the longest in the industry. There's like a 3-hour cut. Wow. So it really lengthens that smoke.
That's when you get all the you want all the smoke and you get all the more complexity.
Well, if you want to get nerdy about it, no,
yes.
I'm kidding.
Let's do it, Jamie. Come on, Jamie.
Sorry, I meant to say one of the longest.
Do you want me to tell you why that works?
Yeah, no, please do.
Well, no. So all the phenols, they're not very volatile, right? They're very, very sort of low in volatility. So they're the sort of like last ones that come out of the run, right? So if you leave your cuts longer, you're going to get a lot more of those. Yeah, you're going to get all those heavier phenols, like sort of in the tails, and that's what you want. So
that's what I love about that whole Kildalton trifecta of distilleries. They all have different water sources, but really they come from the same hilltop with the same water coming down the same terroir. They all use the same technology, the same barrels, but completely different experience.
Yeah.
And that's the magic of it, which is so cool.
Yeah.
It's also interesting. Everybody does, like, if you have a Macallan here, like, we take the most center, tightest cut possible. That's what makes our whiskey unique. And like, I love Reforks. We take the widest cut. This is it. That's what we need.
Exactly. They want that.
Yeah.
Like those are the cuts that they want to keep, because those are the ones, like, if they cut that too short, like if they cut it too narrow, then you're gonna miss all of these phenols. They're gonna get missed. Did you spend all that time peating this whiskey just to miss out on half of that flavor? Like, no,
that sounds terrible.
Exactly. So you might get some of those, like, so when you go that low when you're doing your cuts, you might get like sort of like mushroomy, like earthy. So those might come with it, and but the trade-off is kind of worth it, because you're going to get that peat way more than you're going to get those weird, fainty tasting, like...
It's definitely more expensive. It takes more resources to do.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Lefroy's done... So, Quarter Cask is a great example of kind of a nice, affordable, peated whiskey. Where does Triplewood fall in? Like, where in the price range? Where is that?
In Ontario. Closer to 90, 91, 90, somewhere in there. Yeah. Whereas... Ontario's pricing right now is pretty great between the 10-year and the Quarter Cask. 10 years like 85 and change, and the Quarter Cask is like 86. Yeah, somewhere in there. They're pretty interchangeable that way. And the new Select is now the entry level, and that is $74.95. So that is
that's a steal.
Dipping your toe into peat, and all the wood that comes with that, the PX, the Old English Sherry, the European Oak, the Quarter Cask, the European Quarter Cask, the Virgin American Oak. There's just a lot happening with that one, but it's a lot more approachable for someone. I think the whole ethos behind that was to really make a Lefroy, that friends of Lefroy could share with their friends and family that didn't like the super intense.
Select is a pretty lighter style for Lefroy, which is still not very light.
Still there.
Yeah. But again, they own it, right? Which is like my favorite thing about like you were saying, like no one's
Know who you are and don't be afraid of it, right? Like
exactly. It is one of those things that is completely like you said, like cilantro, like it will. Everyone's like
Tastes like soap. Tastes like cut grass. What? You're both right.
but hey, it's a conversation.
It's a conversation for sure, 100%. So if you have people like great bartenders that you talk to all the time and all these people that know your whiskey and what to do with it, then you don't end up introducing someone to like a full peaty whiskey like right out of the get-go. And that happens all the time. At like whiskey shows, I have people that come up and they're like, oh, I thought whiskey was always peaty, like, or always smoky because that was the first one someone ever served me. And it's like, well, I think you kind of can try a couple different ones. But like if you go right into Lefroy, you might be like, oh, that's aggressive. But that's beautiful.
Walking up and down the aisle of their local liquor store and they are at the LCBO. You see a product consultant or someone that's advising, oh, you've never had an Isla? We'll start here. Yeah. It's like, oh, no, wait. Let's walk before we can run.
Yeah. It's a very...
Oh, yeah.
So, Matt.
Yes.
If you would like to impart one piece of advice, I will too. But what would your... It can be very simple. It can be as big or little as you want.
Biggest thing that took me a while to not just learn, but to implement, because you always know it's important, work-life balance. We're always on, and we're out in the market, especially if we're in the bars with like-minded people, with the bartenders, or we're with consumers. Even if you're not, it doesn't matter about choices you make with what you consume, but you need to carve out your personal time and be able to organize your life that way. And it's I know you're a very organized person, you'll have no problem with that, but it's the social aspect can definitely be because you feel obligated. So you need to know when to just say, hey, this is I'm good. I'm good, yeah. And then the fiscal part of it, that will come. That will come.
Yeah. That's a real thing.
I would like to introduce you to a concept called robe time.
Oh. Yes,
robe time.
Can I say, Jamie, this has really taken over the entire Grand's team.
It has taken over.
I follow the subreddit.
Yeah, it's taken over.
There's probably a hashtag in it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I get these like messages from like our Balvenie brand ambassador group chat of like I've seen people do master classes in robes now. So I feel like it's really gone. We had a bartender trip that we just did in Scotland a couple weeks ago, and it ended with the entire trip in like we got everyone robes and in their white terry cloth robes at the party at the end of the night. So the concept of it is just to take a little bit of time during your day, wherever you are in market or at home, between sort of like the first part of the day, which is, like retail, like any kind of like training stuff, and then the evening, whatever kind of activations or on-premise stuff you have, and like just taking that. And you don't have to have a robe, like it's not necessary. It's great, but like it's not necessary.
Oh, I would have a robe.
You should. And it's just to like take that time. So like as Sam actually said, he's like, Jamie introduced me to this concept, and it makes a difference between like an 80% version of myself and like 110% version of myself. So it's almost like reset, hitting the reset button. You can do whatever you want. You can call home, you can like take a 15-minute nap, you can like refresh, you can whatever you need to do. Yeah, exactly.
Call my son for his birthday today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can do that, and then it's just that moment that you have to yourself where it's just kind of like, okay, that's the beginning of the day, and then here's the rest of the day. And it really does like re-energize you. And so it's kind of builds on that like balance of, the days can get quite long, and so just having that like little piece of time to yourself makes a lot of difference. So take the robe time when you can.
18-hour days they happen pretty fast.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow, we just did that 3 days in a row.
You're like, these are the same clothes I wore on the plane. Like it's 2:00 in the morning. I haven't checked into my hotel yet. I hope they held my room. It's gross.
No,
So
like
those are
I mean, like on my end of things, whatever about the job, I'm incredibly lucky to have this job. Like, so massively lucky. But I've also been very, very lucky to have people like you guys to be able to learn from, and to watch and kind of see how you do things. Like I even said to you today, like I needed to watch you to do what you do today. Like I just because I just needed that like little refresher. It's probably been about a year since I've sat in on someone on presenting, right?
Right.
Like, and I just kind of needed that, like you know, and the entire ambassador team throughout Canada, they're all like that. Just such a great group of people, and so proud to be a part of it now.
I got to interject and say that it was a lot more than luck. You earned it.
100%.
Earned it.
Yes.
They kept me very removed from the process. I didn't even know.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I wasn't doing the hiring. It was, you are on Scotch now. Go over there.
Go work. Go do your
My hair brain was still in the running, and then when it finally came down, you definitely earned it. But building on what you just said, I'm constantly still learning, and I learn from my peers. You know, we go to as many events as we can, and we sit in, and oh wow, okay, that's the way to attack that. Okay, cool. You're constantly evolving, constantly. And if you stop learning, well, what's the point of that, right?
Yeah.
I kind of came up through. I mean, obviously I've worked in bars forever, but like music was kind of like my life's passion. And we used to always like you go and you'd watch your friends play to support them, but also to be like, oh wow, that was really cool. You know, that's I've never thought about doing that, and that's kind of what I've gotten from you guys a lot as well. So like, I would never have thought to approach like the idea of barreling or maturation or the, you know, finishing the way that you would, or the way that you would, or so it's kind of cool to get all.
Wait till you get down to the distilleries. You're just gonna be. It's just gonna come at you from different directions. You just be like, oh my god, this is. You live it and breathe it.
And you got to post all about it.
Yes.
Where are we going to find you? On the Instagram. Where can we find you?
So, I will still have my personal account, which is at Ray Daniel Whisky. With an E. It's the way it's supposed to be spelled.
I feel it's a minority opinion here.
I'm sorry, what?
After we should give that bye. So I'm still there. And Beam Bourbon Canada? Bourbon Beam?
Yeah,
Canada?
Beam Bourbon Canada.
Beam Bourbon Canada. Will be
Post all about it.
I will be taking over that very, very, very within
like
the next,
tomorrow.
Within the next
hour.
couple of guys.
He's waiting for me to turn it over.
That's it.
Just got that go.
But yeah, so that'll be I'll be there.
Awesome.
Nice.
Active, and hopefully kind of show everybody the wonderful world of bourbon in Canada.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yes.
And Jamie, where can people find you?
Still a bourbon thing.
Yes. Excellent.
Still a bourbon thing.
Great. I do love your stories whenever you travel. They're great. They're wonderful.
Oh, good.
And Matt, where can people find you?
Whiskey no E _chef. Sorry, Ray.
No, you're wrong.
And then that's my personal account. And then the work account, World Whiskey. That's World Whiskey no E, whiskey with an E.
Nice. And I'm at Mark Bylock, MarkBylok. Thank you guys for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
This conversation will last another 3 hours. It might still, but we got to stop recording.
This was a bit of an inside the friendship circle sort of conversation.
Yeah. There we go.
It was, we're all in the same city at the same time.
That never
What's going to happen?
That is also
Is the sky going to fall?
Amazing. So cheers to that. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks for being here.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.